Deal Boatmen in the old days were fearless and frightened of nothing. The aid they gave to shipping in distress on this part of the coast and on the Goodwin Sands was almost unbelievable, and they treated their service as part of everyday life. It was on Sunday, December the 28th, 1880, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that the gun was heard being fired from the South Goodwin lightship, which was anchored about 7 miles from Deal, at the South Sands Head. This was fired as a warning signal that a ship was on the dreaded Goodwin Sands, and to alert the crews of the lifeboat and Deal Boatmen in Deal. It was, at the time, blowing a full gale from the southwest, and vessels in comparative shelter, which were anchored up in the downs, were straining at both anchors. It was a gale to stop your breath, or as sailors in those days said, to blow your teeth down your throat. As the various congregations started leaving the churches, their umbrellas were blown inside out, and children were hanging on to their parents for shelter from the wind and the blinding spray as they came up to the seafront. The sound of the lightship's gun echoed through the air again, and almost instantaneously the bell started ringing in the lifeboat house, calling the Deal Boatmen up to make a launch to the stricken vessel. A rush was made for the lifeboats, and the full crew was ready and anxious to launch into the teeth of the gale. The coxswain, Robert Wild, had for 15 years held the yoke lines through the surf on the sands and knew the power of the lifeboat and crew in saving souls. 14 men besides the coxswain were crew, and with the tremendous rush they launched the lifeboat down the steep beach into the raging surf. Sails were raised and a rough course set towards the Casualty, which was being pounded by tremendous seas. There were 3 vessels on the Goodwin Sands. The crew of one took to their boats, and not being on the worst part of the sands, managed to safely get around the North Foreland to Margate, where they were aided ashore. Another vessel, a schooner, which was thought to be the Dane, disappeared and was lost with all hands. The third vessel, a German bark called the Leader, with a crew of 19 on board, was stuck fast on the worst part of the sands, near the Fork Spit. Even on a fine day you would encounter dangerous and peculiar tumbling seas in this area. The bark's main and mizzenmast had already been ripped out of the vessel's hull, and the crew were clinging to the bulwarks on the weather side. Heavy rolling swells were making a clean breach over them and the whole of the vessel, and with the extreme cold, the captain and crew must have been almost exhausted. The Deal lifeboat, the Van Kook, came up slightly windward of the stricken bark and dropped her anchor. She then veered down on the bark, but the cable was too short, so they tied another cable to its end and paid it out. Slowly the lifeboat drifted down closer to the bark. If the cable parted and the lifeboat struck the ship with full force, not a man would have probably survived to tell the tale, or if they had got to leeward of the bark, the crew on the wreck would all have been lost. No friendly steam tug was at hand to aid the lifeboat to get to windward again if she failed in the first attempt to get alongside. Both the crew of the ship in distress and the rescuers were well aware of the stake at issue, and that their first attempt to haul down on the vessel was the only one they could achieve. But the lifeboat crew would have all said, "We're bound to save them," and with the coolness of the race of men and their daring, they dared to do. They concentrated their skills and energies on getting as close to the wreck as they could, so they could throw a line, but kept far enough off to ensure the lifeboat's safety. The lifeboat was being pounded by tremendous seas which were constantly breaking over her. No other boat could have survived or lived for a moment in the seething seas that were around them. The lifeboat had self-emptying capabilities, but the seas were so large and forceful they were filling her up in such a quick succession that she remained full to the thwarts while alongside the distressed vessel. As each swell came thundering in, the coxswain sang out, "Look out, men!" and they grasped the thwarts and held on with both hands, breathless for dear life. One sea hurled the lifeboat against the ship and stove in her fore airbox. Safety in the first instance made it necessary to sheer off. Another sea hit the lifeboat and knocked 2 of the crew under the thwart. The lifeboat's throw line was eventually got on board the bark and communication was established. The crew on the bark were gradually hauled aboard the lifeboat through the raging waves in ones and twos, every time a short break came in the rolling swells. The crew of the stricken vessel were so astonished by the bravery of the lifeboatmen for saving them from the jaws of death, but looked at the lifeboat and the submerged condition of it and the awful turmoil of water around them, that some wished to go back to their perishing vessel. But the coxswain and crew of the lifeboat knew the powers of the gallant vessel. They hoisted the foresail and cut the anchor cable, and with the cargo of 34 souls on board, the lifeboat hurled like a feather away from the treacherous sands, sometimes going before the wind, and the next moment plunging into heavy swell, but she made rapid headway for the shore. One of the rescued crew had been saved by the Van Cook before, and encouraged his comrades of the lifeboat and crew's capability in saving them. This helped tremendously, and panic eased off, and so at last, sodden through and through, exhausted but successful, they landed the staggering and grateful German crew on Deal Beach, where, despite the storm, crowds met them all with thankful hearts. A delivery of rum which was bought for the use of the lifeboat crew was also generously given to the rescued crew and was much appreciated. The names of the men who on this occasion manned the lifeboat deserve to be mentioned. Robert Wilds, coxswain; Thomas Cribbin, Thomas Parsons, George Payne, Charles Hall, Thomas Roberts, Robert Redsall, Richard Roberts, second coxswain, William Baker, John Hayward, Edward Payne, George Philpott, W. Marsh, M. Adams and H. Foster. A service of exceptional gallantry, success and risk of their preserving services. Another day in the life of a Deal Boatman.